It was a quiet evening in a small town, the kind of place where everyone knew everyone, and life moved at a slow, predictable pace. The sun was setting, casting a warm golden glow over the streets, and the faint sound of children playing could be heard in the distance. But this peaceful scene was about to be shattered by an event that would leave the entire town in shock. A young boy, no more than 10 years old, was seen running down the street, his face streaked with tears. His small frame was trembling, and his breaths came in short, panicked gasps. He looked around wildly, as if searching for something, or someone. His clothes were dirty, and his hair was disheveled, giving him the appearance of someone who had been through a lot. People on the street stopped and stared, but no one approached him. There was something about the boy's desperation that made them hesitate. Finally, the boy spotted what he was looking for, a police station at the end of the street. Without a second thought, he sprinted towards it, his little legs carrying him as fast as they could. The police station was a modest building, with a small parking lot and a sign that read Town Police Department. The boy burst through the doors, his chest heaving, and collapsed onto the floor, sobbing uncontrollably. The officers inside were taken aback by the sudden entrance. One of them, a middle-aged man with a kind face and a calm demeanor, immediately rushed to the boy's side. He knelt down and placed a gentle hand on the boy's shoulder. Hey, it's okay. You're safe now. Can you tell me what's wrong?" the officer asked, his voice soft and reassuring. The boy looked up at the officer, his eyes filled with fear and confusion. He tried to speak, but the words caught in his throat. He took a deep breath and tried again. It's my mom," he stammered, his voice barely above a whisper. She's not my real mom." The officer's eyes widened in surprise. He exchanged a quick glance with his colleagues, who had gathered around them. This was not something they heard every day. "What do you mean, son?" the officer asked, keeping his tone gentle. "Can you tell me what happened?" The boy nodded, but the tears kept flowing. He wiped his face with the back of his hand and took another shaky breath. I found some papers in her room. They were hidden in a box under her bed. I wasn't supposed to see them, but I did. And they said that she's not my real mom. My real mom, she's gone. I don't know where she is." The room fell silent as the officers processed what the boy had just said. This was no ordinary case. The officer who had been speaking to the boy stood up and motioned for his colleagues to step aside. "We need to look into this right away," he said in a low voice. "This could be something serious." The other officers nodded in agreement. They knew that time was of the essence. The boy was clearly in distress, and if what he was saying was true, then there was a lot more to this story than met the eye. The officer turned back to the boy and crouched down again. "Can you tell us your name, son?" he asked. The boy hesitated for a moment before answering. It's Alex," he said quietly. "Okay, Alex," the officer said, giving him a small, reassuring smile. "My name is Officer Daniels. We're going to help you, okay? But we need you to tell us everything you know. Can you do that?" Alex nodded, though he still looked scared. Officer Daniels helped him to his feet and led him to a nearby chair. He handed the boy a glass of water and sat down across from him. "Take your time, Alex. Start from the beginning." Alex took a sip of water and began to recount his story. He explained how he had always felt like something was off with his mom. She was kind to him most of the time, but there were moments when she would act strangely, like she was hiding something. He had never thought much of it until that day, when he had accidentally stumbled upon the hidden box in her room. "I was looking for a toy," Alex said, his voice trembling. "I thought it might be in her room, so I went in to look for it. That's when I saw the box. It was under her bed, and it was locked. But I found the key. It was in her drawer. I didn't mean to snoop, I swear." I just wanted to see what was inside. Officer Daniels nodded, encouraging him to continue. What did you find in the box, Alex? Alex's eyes filled with tears again as he remembered what he had seen. There were papers, lots of papers. And photos. There was a photo of a woman I didn't recognize. She looked like me. And there was a birth certificate. It had my name on it, but the mother's name wasn't my mom's name. It was someone else's. And there were other things too, legal documents, I think. I didn't understand all of it, but I knew something was wrong. Officer Daniels listened intently, his mind racing. This was not just a simple case of a child's imagination running wild. There was a real possibility that something sinister was going on. He turned to one of his colleagues and whispered, "We need to get a team to the boy's house right away. This could be a kidnapping case." The other officer nodded and quickly left the room to make the necessary arrangements. Officer Daniels turned back to Alex. "You're being very brave, Alex. We're going to do everything we can to figure this out. But I need you to stay here with us for now, okay? You're safe here." Alex nodded, though he still looked scared. Officer Daniels gave him a reassuring pat on the shoulder and stood up. He knew that they had to act fast. If Alex's suspicions were correct, then the woman he had been living with all these years was not his real mother. And if that was the case, then they needed to find out who she really was. And where Alex's real mother was. As the officers prepared to head to Alex's house, the boy sat quietly in the chair, clutching the glass of water. His mind was racing with questions, and he couldn't shake the feeling of dread that had settled in his chest. He didn't know what was going to happen next, but he knew one thing for sure: his life was about to change forever. The police station was now a hive of activity. Officers moved quickly, preparing to head to Alex's house to investigate the shocking revelation the boy had brought to their attention. Officer Daniels stayed close to Alex, making sure the boy felt safe and supported. He knew that Alex was at the center of a potentially life-changing situation, and he wanted to ensure the child didn't feel alone in this. "Alex," Officer Daniels said gently, crouching down to meet the boy's eye level. "We're going to your house now to talk to your mom, well, the woman you've been living with. You'll stay here with one of our officers, okay? Her name is Officer Martinez, and she's really nice. She'll take care of you while we're gone." Alex nodded, though his hands were still trembling. He looked up at Officer Martinez, a kind-faced woman with a warm smile. She knelt beside him and said, "Hey, Alex. How about we get you something to eat? You must be hungry after all this." Alex shook his head. "I'm not hungry," he whispered. I just want to know what's going to happen." Officer Martinez nodded understandingly. "I know this is scary, but you've done the right thing by coming here. We're going to figure this out, okay? You're not alone." Meanwhile, Officer Daniels and a team of officers were already on their way to Alex's house. The drive was short, as the town wasn't very large, but the tension in the car was palpable. No one knew what they were about to walk into. Was the woman Alex had been living with really not his mother? And if she wasn't, who was she? And where was Alex's real mother? When they arrived at the house, it looked like any other home on the block, neat, quiet, and unassuming. Officer Daniels took a deep breath and approached the front door. He knocked firmly, his hand resting on his radio just in case things took a turn. The door opened after a few moments, and a woman appeared. She looked to be in her late 30s, with a tired but friendly expression. She smiled at the officers, though her smile faltered slightly when she saw the serious looks on their faces. "Can I help you?" she asked, her voice calm but curious. "Ma'am," Officer Daniels began, "we're here because of Alex. He came to the police station earlier, and he shared some concerns with us. May we come in and speak with you?" The woman's face changed instantly. Her smile disappeared, and her eyes widened in what looked like a mix of shock and fear. She hesitated for a moment before stepping aside. "Of course," she said quietly. "Please, come in." The officers entered the house, which was tidy and well-kept. There were photos on the walls, pictures of Alex growing up, smiling and happy. It looked like a normal family home, but Officer Daniels knew that appearances could be deceiving. "Ma'am," he said, turning to the woman, "Alex told us that he found some documents in your room. Documents that suggest you might not be his biological mother. Can you explain this?" The woman's face went pale. She sank into a chair, her hands shaking as she clasped them together. For a long moment, she didn't speak. Then, she took a deep breath and looked up at the officers. "I knew this day would come," she said softly. "I just didn't think it would be so soon." Officer Daniels exchanged a glance with his colleagues. This was not the reaction they had expected. "Ma'am," he said carefully, "we need you to tell us the truth. Who are you, and where is Alex's real mother?" The woman looked down at her hands, tears welling up in her eyes. "My name is Clara," she began. "And you're right, I'm not Alex's biological mother. But I've raised him since he was a baby. I love him like he's my own." "Then who is his real mother?" Officer Daniels pressed. "And how did you come to raise him?" Clara hesitated, as if weighing her words carefully. "Alex's mother, her name was Laura. She was my best friend. We grew up together, and she was like a sister to me. But Laura, she wasn't well. She struggled with a lot of things, depression, addiction. When Alex was born, she couldn't take care of him. She was in no state to be a mother." Clara paused, wiping away a tear. "Laura came to me one day, begging me to take Alex. She said she couldn't do it anymore, and she was afraid something bad would happen to him if she kept him. She asked me to raise him as my own. I didn't know what to do, but I couldn't say no. I loved Laura, and I loved Alex. So I agreed." Officer Daniels listened intently, his mind racing. This was a complicated situation, and he needed to get to the bottom of it. "What happened to Laura?" he asked. Clara's face crumpled, and she began to cry. She disappeared. A few months after I took Alex, Laura just vanished. I tried to find her, but no one knew where she went. I even filed a missing persons report, but nothing ever came of it. I didn't know what else to do, so I kept raising Alex. I didn't want him to grow up without a mother." The room fell silent as the officers processed Clara's story. It was clear that she cared deeply for Alex, but there were still a lot of unanswered questions. Where was Laura? And why had Clara kept this secret for so long? "Clara," Officer Daniels said gently, "we need to look into this further. We'll need to take you to the station for questioning, and we'll also need to search the house for any evidence that might help us find Laura. Do you understand?" Clara nodded, though she looked heartbroken. "I understand," she whispered. I don't want Alex to hate me. I did what I thought was best for him." Officer Daniels sighed. "We'll do everything we can to make sure Alex is taken care of. But right now, we need to focus on finding the truth." As the officers began their search of the house, Clara was escorted to the police car. She looked back at the home she had shared with Alex, her eyes filled with sorrow. She had spent years trying to protect him, but now her secret was out, and there was no telling what would happen next. Back at the police station, Alex was still sitting with Officer Martinez. He had been quiet for most of the time, lost in his thoughts. But when he saw Clara being brought into the station, his eyes widened in shock. "Clara," he called out, his voice trembling. "What's going on? Why are they bringing you here?" Clara looked at Alex, her eyes filled with tears. "I'm so sorry," Alex," she said softly. "I never wanted you to find out this way." Alex stared at her, confused and scared. "Find out what? What's happening?" Officer Daniels stepped forward, placing a hand on Alex's shoulder. "Alex, we need to talk. There's a lot we need to figure out, but we're going to help you through this, okay?" Alex nodded, though he looked more lost than ever. His world had been turned upside down in just a few hours, and he had no idea what was coming next. The police station was now buzzing with activity. Clara was taken into a separate room for questioning, while Alex remained with Officer Martinez in a quiet corner of the station. The boy was visibly shaken, his small hands clutching a blanket that had been given to him. He kept glancing toward the door, as if hoping Clara would walk back in and tell him everything was going to be okay. But deep down, he knew things would never be the same. Officer Martinez sat beside him, her voice calm and reassuring. "Alex, I know this is a lot to take in. But you're safe here, and we're going to figure everything out. Can you tell me how you're feeling?" Alex looked down at his hands, his voice barely above a whisper. "I don't know. I'm scared. I don't understand what's happening. Clara, she's always been my mom. But now, I don't know who she is. Or who I am." Officer Martinez nodded sympathetically. "It's okay to feel scared, Alex. This is a big thing to process. But you're not alone, okay? We're all here to help you." Meanwhile, in the interrogation room, Clara sat across from Officer Daniels and another detective. Her hands were clasped tightly together, and her face was pale. She looked exhausted, as if the weight of the secret she had been carrying for years had finally caught up to her. "Clara," Officer Daniels began, his tone firm but not unkind, "we need you to be completely honest with us. Alex's biological mother, Laura, what really happened to her? And why did you keep this from Alex for so long?" Clara took a deep breath, her eyes filling with tears. "I've already told you the truth. Laura was my best friend, but she was struggling. She couldn't take care of Alex, so she asked me to raise him. I didn't plan for it to happen this way, but I couldn't say no. I loved Alex, and I wanted to give him a good life." And after Laura disappeared, the detective asked, "Did you try to find her? Did you contact her family?" Clara shook her head. "Laura didn't have any family. She was alone, just like me. I tried to find her, but there was no trace of her. I didn't know what else to do, so I kept raising Alex. I thought it was what Laura would have wanted." Officer Daniels leaned forward, his expression serious. "Clara, we need to know if there's anything else you're not telling us. Did Laura ever mention wanting to come back for Alex? Did she leave any clues about where she might have gone?" Clara hesitated, her eyes darting to the floor. "There was one thing," she said slowly. "A few months after she disappeared, I got a letter. It was from Laura. She said she was sorry for leaving, but she couldn't be the mother Alex needed. She said she was going away to get better, but she didn't say where. And she asked me to keep taking care of Alex." "Do you still have the letter?" the detective asked. Clara shook her head. "No. I burned it. I didn't want Alex to ever find it and think his mother had abandoned him. I wanted him to have a normal life, without all this pain." Officer Daniels exchanged a glance with the detective. Clara's story was heartbreaking, but it also raised more questions than answers. Where was Laura now? Was she still alive? And if she was, did she know what had happened to her son? "Clara," Officer Daniels said gently, "we're going to need to look into this further. In the meantime, we'll need to place Alex in temporary custody until we can figure out the best course of action. Do you understand?" Clara nodded, tears streaming down her face. "I understand. I hope Alex knows how much I love him. I never meant to hurt him." Back in the waiting area, Alex was growing more anxious by the minute. He kept asking Officer Martinez when he could see Clara, but she gently explained that Clara was talking to the officers and that he would see her soon. "Alex," Officer Martinez said, "we're going to need to find a safe place for you to stay for a little while. Just until we figure everything out. Do you have any family or friends you can stay with?" Alex shook his head. "I don't have anyone else. Just Clara." Officer Martinez gave him a reassuring smile. "That's okay. We'll make sure you're taken care of. There are people who specialize in helping kids in situations like yours. You won't be alone, I promise." Just then, Officer Daniels walked into the room. He knelt down in front of Alex, his expression kind but serious. "Alex, we're going to take you to a safe place for now. It's called a foster home, and there are people there who will take good care of you while we work things out. Is that okay?" Alex's eyes filled with tears, but he nodded. "Will I ever see Clara again?" he asked, his voice trembling. Officer Daniels hesitated. "We'll see, Alex. Right now, we need to focus on finding out the truth about what happened. But no matter what, we're going to make sure you're safe and taken care of." As Alex was led out of the police station by a social worker, he couldn't help but feel a deep sense of loss. Everything he had ever known was being taken away from him, and he had no idea what the future held. All he could do was hope that somehow, things would work out. Meanwhile, Clara sat alone in the interrogation room, her head in her hands. She had spent years trying to protect Alex, but now it felt like everything was falling apart. She didn't know what would happen to her, or to Alex, but she prayed that he would one day understand why she had done what she did. As the officers continued their investigation, they began to piece together the fragments of Clara's story. They reached out to old contacts, searched through records, and even contacted neighboring towns to see if anyone had heard of Laura. But so far, there was no trace of her. The case was far from over, and the truth was still shrouded in mystery. But one thing was clear: Alex's life had been changed forever, and the search for answers was only just beginning. The days that followed were a whirlwind of confusion and uncertainty for Alex. He was placed in a temporary foster home, a small house on the outskirts of town run by a kind older couple named Mr. and Mrs. Carter. They were warm and welcoming, doing their best to make Alex feel comfortable, but the boy was still struggling to process everything that had happened. The Carters' home was cozy, with a small garden in the back and a room filled with toys and books for children. Alex was given a room of his own, but he spent most of his time sitting by the window, staring out at the street. He missed Clara terribly, even though he didn't fully understand why she had lied to him. He also couldn't stop thinking about his real mother, Laura. Who was she? Where was she? And why had she left him? Meanwhile, the police were working tirelessly to uncover the truth. Officer Daniels had taken a personal interest in the case, determined to find answers for Alex. He spent hours going through old records, talking to people who had known Laura, and following up on any leads that might shed light on her disappearance. One afternoon, Officer Daniels received a call that made his heart race. It was from a woman who had lived in the same apartment building as Laura years ago. She claimed to have some information that might be useful. "I remember Laura," the woman said over the phone. "She was a sweet girl, but she had a lot of problems. She was always talking about her son, Alex. She loved him so much, but she was struggling to take care of him. One day, she just disappeared. I always wondered what happened to her." Officer Daniels leaned forward, his pen poised over his notebook. "Do you remember anything else? Did she ever mention where she might be going or if she had any plans?" The woman hesitated. "There was one thing. A few days before she disappeared, she mentioned something about going to a treatment center. She said she wanted to get better for Alex. But I don't know which one she was talking about." Officer Daniels thanked the woman and hung up the phone, his mind racing. A treatment center, that was a lead. If Laura had gone to a facility to get help, there might be records of her there. He immediately began calling rehab centers and hospitals in the area, asking if they had any record of a woman named Laura who had checked in years ago. It was a long shot, but Officer Daniels refused to give up. He knew how much this meant to Alex, and he was determined to find the boy's mother, no matter how long it took. Back at the foster home, Alex was slowly starting to open up to the Carters. Mrs. Carter had a gentle way about her, and she often sat with Alex, talking to him about his feelings and reassuring him that everything would be okay. "It's okay to feel sad, Alex," she said one evening as they sat together in the living room. "You've been through a lot. But you're a strong boy, and you're going to get through this." Alex looked up at her, his eyes filled with questions. "Do you think I'll ever find my real mom?" he asked quietly. Mrs. Carter smiled softly. "I don't know, sweetheart. But the police are doing everything they can to find her. And no matter what happens, you're not alone. You have people who care about you, and we're all here to help you." Alex nodded, though he still felt a deep ache in his chest. He missed Clara, and he couldn't stop wondering about Laura. He didn't know what the future held, but he hoped that somehow, things would work out. A few days later, Officer Daniels got a breakthrough. One of the rehab centers he had contacted called back with information. They had a record of a woman named Laura who had checked in years ago. She had stayed for a few months before leaving abruptly. The center didn't have any current information on her, but they did have an old address on file, a small town about 2 hours away. Officer Daniels immediately set out to follow the lead. He drove to the town and began asking around, showing Laura's photo to anyone who might recognize her. It was a long shot, but he was determined to leave no stone unturned. After hours of searching, he finally got a hit. A shopkeeper in the town recognized Laura's photo. "Yeah, I remember her," the man said. "She used to come in here all the time. She was a nice lady, but she seemed troubled." Officer Daniels arrived at the mountain community early the next morning. The drive had been long, and the winding roads were steep and narrow, but he was determined to see this through. The community was a small, secluded place, surrounded by tall pine trees and a sense of quiet serenity. It was exactly the kind of place someone might go to heal and start over. As he stepped out of his car, he was greeted by a woman in her 50s with a warm smile. She introduced herself as Sarah, one of the community's coordinators. "How can I help you, officer?" she asked. Officer Daniels showed her a photo of Laura. "I'm looking for this woman. Her name is Laura, and she might have come here years ago. She has a son named Alex, and it's very important that I find her." Sarah studied the photo carefully, her expression thoughtful. "Laura, yes, I remember her. She was here for a while. She was quiet, kept to herself, but she was kind. She talked about her son a lot. She said she wanted to get better for him." Officer Daniels felt a surge of hope. "Is she still here?" he asked. Sarah shook her head. "No, she left about a year ago. She said she was ready to start over and that she wanted to find her son. She didn't say where she was going, but she did leave a forwarding address. Let me check our records." Officer Daniels waited anxiously as Sarah went to retrieve the information. When she returned, she handed him a piece of paper with an address written on it. "This is where she said she was going. It's a small town about 3 hours from here." Officer Daniels thanked Sarah and quickly got back on the road. The address led him to a modest house in a quiet neighborhood. He knocked on the door, his heart pounding. After a few moments, the door opened, and a woman appeared. She looked tired but kind, and there was something familiar about her eyes. "Laura?" Officer Daniels asked cautiously. The woman's eyes widened in surprise. "Yes, that's me. "Who are you?" "I'm Officer Daniels," he said, showing his badge. "I've been looking for you. It's about your son, Alex." Laura's face went pale, and she stumbled back a step. "Alex? Is he okay? What's happened?" Officer Daniels quickly explained the situation, how Alex had discovered the truth about Clara, how he had come to the police station in tears, and how they had been searching for her ever since. Laura listened in stunned silence, tears streaming down her face. "I never wanted to leave him," she said, her voice breaking. "But I was in such a bad place back then. I couldn't take care of him, and I didn't want him to suffer because of me. Clara was my best friend. I thought she would take care of him until I could get better. But then I lost touch with her. I didn't know how to find her or Alex. I've been looking for them ever since." Officer Daniels nodded sympathetically. "Laura, Alex is safe. He's been staying with a foster family while we sorted things out. But he's been asking about you. He wants to know who you are and why you left." Laura wiped her tears and took a deep breath. "I want to see him. I need to explain everything to him. I just hope he can forgive me." Officer Daniels gave her a reassuring smile. "I think he will. But we need to take this slowly. Alex has been through a lot, and we need to make sure he's ready to see you." Laura nodded, her hands trembling. "I understand. Whatever it takes, I just want to be there for him." Officer Daniels arranged for Laura to come back to town with him. They drove in silence, both lost in their thoughts. Laura stared out the window, her mind racing with emotions, fear, hope, guilt, and love. She didn't know how Alex would react to seeing her, but she was determined to make things right. When they arrived back in town, Officer Daniels took Laura to the police station to discuss the next steps. They decided it would be best to introduce Laura to Alex gradually, starting with a letter. Laura sat down and poured her heart out, writing about how much she loved him, how sorry she was for leaving, and how she had spent years trying to get better so she could be the mother he deserved. The next day, Officer Daniels and a social worker went to the Carter's house to talk to Alex. They found him sitting in the garden, staring at the flowers. He looked up when they approached, his eyes filled with curiosity and apprehension. "Alex," Officer Daniels said gently, "we have some news. We found your mother, Laura. She's been looking for you for a long time, and she wants to see you. But we wanted to give you this first." He handed Alex the letter. The boy took it hesitantly, his hands shaking as he unfolded the paper. He began to read, his eyes scanning the words slowly. As he read, his expression changed, first confusion, then sadness, and finally a glimmer of hope. When he finished, he looked up at Officer Daniels, his eyes filled with tears. "Is this really from my mom?" he asked quietly. Officer Daniels nodded. "Yes, Alex. She wrote it for you. She's been through a lot, but she loves you very much. She wants to see you, but only when you're ready." Alex looked down at the letter again, his mind racing. He didn't know what to feel, anger, sadness, curiosity, or hope. But one thing was clear, he wanted to meet her. "Can I see her?" he asked softly. Officer Daniels smiled. "Of course, Alex. We'll arrange a meeting. But take your time. This is a big step, and it's okay to feel unsure." Alex nodded, clutching the letter to his chest. For the first time in weeks, he felt a flicker of hope. Maybe, just maybe, things were going to be okay. The meeting between Alex and Laura was arranged for the following day at the police station. Officer Daniels and the social worker wanted to make sure the environment was safe and neutral for both of them. Alex spent the night at the Carter's house, his mind racing with emotions. He read Laura's letter over and over, each time feeling a little more hopeful but also a little more nervous. He didn't know what to expect, but he knew one thing for sure, he wanted to meet her. The next morning, Officer Daniels picked up Alex and drove him to the station. The boy was quiet during the ride, clutching the letter in his hands. When they arrived, Officer Daniels led him to a small, cozy room where Laura was waiting. She stood up as soon as they entered, her eyes filled with tears. "Alex," she whispered, her voice trembling. Alex froze in the doorway, staring at her. She looked different from the photo he had seen in Clara's hidden box. Her hair was shorter, and there were lines on her face that hadn't been there before. But her eyes, they were the same. They were kind, and they were filled with love. Officer Daniels gently nudged Alex forward. "It's okay, Alex. Take your time." Alex took a few hesitant steps into the room, his heart pounding. Laura didn't move toward him, she stayed where she was, giving him space. She didn't want to overwhelm him. "Hi, Alex," she said softly. "I'm so happy to finally see you." Alex didn't say anything at first. He just stood there, looking at her. Then, slowly, he held up the letter. "Did you really write this?" he asked. Laura nodded, tears streaming down her face. "Yes, I did. Every word is true. I've thought about you every single day since I left. I'm so sorry, Alex. I never wanted to leave you, but I was sick, and I didn't know how to take care of you. I thought Clara would be able to give you the life I couldn't." Alex's lower lip trembled, and he took a step closer. "Why didn't you come back?" he asked, his voice breaking. Laura's heart ached at the pain in his voice. "I tried, Alex. I really did. But I didn't know where you were. Clara moved away, and I couldn't find her. I spent years trying to get better so I could be the mom you deserved. And when I was finally ready, I didn't know how to find you. I've been looking for you ever since." Alex stared at her, his eyes filled with a mix of emotions, anger, sadness, confusion, but also a glimmer of hope. He didn't know what to say or how to feel. Part of him wanted to run to her and hug her, but another part of him was still hurt and confused. Laura took a deep breath, her voice gentle. "I don't expect you to forgive me right away, Alex. I know I made mistakes, and I know I hurt you. But I want to be here for you now, if you'll let me. I want to be your mom." Alex looked down at the letter in his hands, his mind racing. He didn't know what to do, but he knew one thing: he wanted to know her. He wanted to understand who she was and why she had left. Can I ask you questions?" he asked hesitantly. Laura nodded, her eyes filled with relief. "Of course, Alex. You can ask me anything. I'll answer as honestly as I can." Alex took a deep breath and sat down in a chair across from her. Officer Daniels and the social worker stayed in the room but kept their distance, letting Alex and Laura have their moment. "Why did you leave me with Clara?" Alex asked, his voice small. Laura sighed, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. "I was sick, Alex. I had a lot of problems, depression, addiction. I couldn't take care of myself, let alone a baby. I was scared that I would hurt you or that something bad would happen to you if I kept you. Clara was my best friend, and I trusted her. I thought she would take care of you until I could get better." Alex nodded slowly, processing her words. Did you ever want to come back?" "Every single day," Laura said, her voice filled with emotion. "I thought about you all the time. I wanted to come back, but I didn't know where you were. And I was scared that you would hate me for leaving." Alex looked down at his hands, his mind racing. He didn't know what to say. Part of him was still angry and hurt, but another part of him understood. He could see the pain in her eyes, and he could tell that she was telling the truth. "What happened to you after you left?" he asked quietly. Laura took a deep breath, her voice steady but filled with emotion. "I went to a treatment center to get help. It was hard, but I knew I had to do it if I ever wanted to be a good mom to you. After I left the center, I moved to a small town and started over. I've been working hard to stay healthy and build a life for myself. And I've been looking for you ever since." Alex nodded, his eyes filled with tears. He didn't know what to say, but he felt a little better knowing that she had been trying to get better for him. Do you think we can start over?" he asked hesitantly. Laura's eyes filled with tears, and she nodded. "I would love that, Alex. But only if you're ready. I don't want to rush you or make you feel uncomfortable. This is your decision." Alex looked at her for a long moment, his mind racing. He didn't know what the future held, but he knew one thing: he wanted to give her a chance. "Okay," he said softly. "I want to try." Laura's face broke into a smile, and she reached out to take his hand. "Thank you, Alex. I promise I'll do everything I can to be the mom you deserve." Officer Daniels and the social worker exchanged a smile, relieved that the meeting had gone well. They knew there was still a long road ahead for Alex and Laura, but this was a good start. As Alex left the room with Officer Daniels, he felt a strange mix of emotions: hope, fear, and curiosity. He didn't know what the future held, but he was ready to find out. The days that followed the meeting between Alex and Laura were filled with cautious hope. Laura was allowed supervised visits with Alex, and the two began to slowly rebuild their relationship. It wasn't easy. Alex still had a lot of questions and emotions to work through, and Laura was careful not to overwhelm him. But they were both determined to make it work. During one of their visits, Laura brought a photo album she had kept all these years. It was filled with pictures of Alex as a baby, as well as a few of herself and Clara. Alex flipped through the pages, his eyes wide with curiosity. "Is that really me?" he asked, pointing to a photo of a baby with a big smile. Laura laughed softly. "Yes, that's you. You were such a happy baby. You loved to laugh and play." Alex studied the photos, his heart swelling with a mix of emotions. It was strange to see himself as a baby, to see the life he had lived before he could even remember. He pointed to a photo of Laura holding him, her face glowing with happiness. "You look so happy here," he said quietly. Laura's eyes filled with tears. "I was, Alex. You were my whole world. I loved you more than anything." Alex looked up at her, his expression serious. "Then why did you leave?" Laura sighed, her heart aching at the question. "I've told you before, but I'll say it again. I was sick, Alex. I had a lot of problems, and I couldn't take care of you the way you deserved. I thought Clara could give you a better life than I could. I never wanted to leave you, but I thought it was the best thing for you." Alex nodded slowly, his mind racing. He still didn't fully understand, but he was starting to see things from her perspective. He could tell that she had been through a lot, and he could see how much she loved him. "Do you think we can be a family again?" he asked hesitantly. Laura's eyes filled with tears, and she reached out to take his hand. "I would love that, Alex. But it's going to take time. We both have a lot to work through, and I don't want to rush you. But I promise I'll be here for you, no matter what." Alex nodded, a small smile tugging at the corners of his lips. "Okay. I want to try." Meanwhile, Clara's situation was also being addressed. She had been charged with custodial interference, but the courts took into account her intentions and the fact that she had raised Alex as her own. She was given a suspended sentence and ordered to attend counseling. She was also allowed supervised visits with Alex, though they were less frequent than Laura's. Alex was conflicted about Clara. He still loved her, she had been his mom for as long as he could remember, but he was also angry and confused. During one of their visits, he finally worked up the courage to ask her the question that had been weighing on his mind. "Why didn't you tell me the truth?" he asked, his voice trembling. Clara sighed, her eyes filled with regret. I wanted to, Alex. So many times, I wanted to tell you. But I was scared. I didn't want to hurt you, and I didn't want you to feel like you didn't belong. I thought I was protecting you. Alex looked down at his hands, his mind racing. But you lied to me. All these years, you lied to me. Clara's eyes filled with tears. I know, Alex. And I'm so sorry. I never meant to hurt you. I just wanted to give you a good life. I love you so much, and I didn't want to lose you. Alex didn't know what to say. He still loved Clara, but he was also hurt and confused. He knew it would take time to work through his feelings, but he was willing to try. As the weeks went by, Alex began to adjust to his new reality. He continued to live with the Carters, but he spent more and more time with Laura. They went to the park, played games, and talked about their lives. Laura was careful not to push him too hard, and she gave him the space he needed to process his emotions. One day, Laura took Alex to a small cafe for lunch. They sat at a table by the window, the sun streaming in and warming their faces. Alex stirred his milkshake with a straw, his expression thoughtful. Laura, he said hesitantly, do you think we can live together someday? Laura's heart swelled with hope, but she was careful not to rush him. I would love that, Alex. But only when you're ready. We've both been through a lot, and I don't want to rush you. But no matter what, I'll be here for you. Alex nodded, a small smile tugging at his lips. I think I'd like that. But, can Clara still be part of my life too? Laura reached out and took his hand, her eyes filled with love. Of course, Alex. Clara loves you too, and she's been a big part of your life. We'll figure it out together, okay? Alex smiled, feeling a sense of relief. He didn't know what the future held, but he knew one thing: he had two moms who loved him, and he was ready to start this new chapter of his life. Over the next few months, Alex's life began to settle into a new rhythm. He continued to live with the Carters, but he spent more and more time with Laura, slowly building the bond they had lost so many years ago. Clara, too, remained a part of his life, though their relationship had changed. It wasn't easy, there were still moments of confusion and hurt, but Alex was learning to navigate his complicated feelings with the help of the people who cared about him. One sunny afternoon, Laura took Alex to the park for a picnic. They spread out a blanket under a large oak tree and unpacked the sandwiches and snacks Laura had prepared. Alex leaned back on his elbows, watching the clouds drift across the sky. Laura, he said after a while, do you think we'll ever be like a normal family? Laura smiled softly, her heart swelling with love for him. What's a normal family, Alex? Every family is different. What matters is that we love each other and support each other. And I think we're doing pretty well at that. Alex thought about this for a moment, then nodded. Yeah, I guess you're right. I wish things had been different. Laura reached out and took his hand, her expression gentle. I know, Alex. I wish things had been different too. But we can't change the past. All we can do is make the most of the time we have now. And I'm so grateful to have you in my life again. Alex smiled, feeling a sense of peace he hadn't felt in a long time. He knew there would still be challenges ahead, but he also knew that he wasn't alone. He had Laura, Clara, and the Carters, all of whom loved him and wanted the best for him. A few weeks later, the court made a decision about Alex's living arrangements. After careful consideration, they granted Laura custody of Alex, with the condition that Clara would still be allowed regular visits. It was a bittersweet moment for everyone involved, but it was also a new beginning. On the day Alex moved in with Laura, the Carters threw a small farewell party for him. They had grown to love Alex like their own, and they were sad to see him go, but they were also happy for him. They knew he was going to a home filled with love. We're going to miss you, Alex, Mrs. Carter said, her eyes filled with tears. But we're so happy for you. And you know you're always welcome here, anytime. Alex hugged her tightly, his own eyes filling with tears. Thank you for everything, he whispered. I'll never forget you. As Alex and Laura drove to their new home, Alex felt a mix of emotions: excitement, nervousness, and hope. He didn't know what the future held, but he was ready to face it with Laura by his side. Their new home was a small house on the edge of town, with a backyard big enough for Alex to play in. Laura had worked hard to make it feel like home, and she had even set up a room just for Alex. When they walked inside, Alex's eyes lit up. "This is my room?" he asked, his voice filled with wonder. Laura nodded, smiling. "Yes, it's all yours. I hope you like it." Alex ran his hand over the bedspread, his heart swelling with happiness. It was the first time he had ever had a room that was truly his own, and it felt like a fresh start. That night, as Alex lay in bed, he thought about everything that had happened. He thought about Clara, who had raised him and loved him like her own. He thought about Laura, who had fought so hard to be a part of his life again. And he thought about the Carters, who had taken him in when he needed them most. He didn't know what the future held, but he knew one thing: he was loved. And that was enough. Years later, Alex stood on the stage at his high school graduation, his heart swelling with pride. In the audience, Laura and Clara sat side by side, both beaming with pride. They had come a long way since that fateful day when Alex had run to the police station in tears, and they had worked hard to build a life together. As Alex accepted his diploma, he looked out at the crowd and smiled. He had faced many challenges in his life, but he had also found strength and love in the people who cared about him. And he knew that no matter what the future held, he would always have a family who loved him. After the ceremony, Laura and Clara hugged Alex tightly, their eyes filled with tears. "We're so proud of you," Laura said, her voice trembling with emotion. "You've come so far," Clara added, her own eyes shining with pride. Alex smiled, feeling a sense of gratitude and love. He didn't know what the future held, but he knew one thing: he was ready to face it, with his family by his side. And as they walked out of the school together, Alex knew that no matter what challenges lay ahead, he would always have a place to call home.